Could hidden toxins and unprocessed trauma be colluding to derail your health? So, today on the TPE Blueprint podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Don Wood, who's the founder of Inspired Performance Health and creator of his patented method for clearing trauma really quickly and unlocking peak performance and overall vitality. Let's dive into it. Well, here we go. Dr. Don Wood, it's great to have you on the podcast here, the TPE Blueprint. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate the invite, Joe.
Of course, yeah. And I've seen the work that you do, and I've seen a lot of your success stories with where you're clearing folks of this subtype of trauma they've had in their life, and it just almost creates it's almost like opening the curtains, it seems like, for so many of your patients for the last 15 or so years. I think you've been doing this.
Yeah, I started doing the research in about 2009, and then officially launched everything 2015. So
Yeah.
that's about how long we've been working on it.
You have an interesting, so the reason why, we got connected, and I was like, okay, what you're doing is very fascinating in the method. And I would love for you to kind of describe at least an overview of how you look at it and how you handle these kind of situations of, pretty major traumas that you've worked with professional athletes, veterans. I mean, people that have just gone through some pretty horrific stuff, but everybody has something, I feel like, inside us. And
Yep.
then you layer it with the toxin conversation and how that is also impairing our, performance, our just longevity, feel good. So I guess, what are your general thoughts there as we just start, and how those all kind of relate to each other?
Well, I think this is what you're going to find fascinating. We talked a little bit about it. Is the brain is basically, I say, think of the brain as the computer,
Hmm.
and the body's the printer. So you can put all the nutrients and all the paper and toner and everything in the printer, but if the computer's not sending the correct commands or not sending the commands, the body's not going to get the maintenance done.
Hmm.
And so what I've been showing is, so people will say, well, I do everything. I do detoxes, I eat right, I use all these vitamins and supplements. But the problem is trauma actually affects the DNA and the methylation. So you could be putting all the best stuff into you, but it can't methylate it.
Hmm.
And people would say, well, why would that be? How could trauma have that effect? Because we know what trauma psychologically does, but people have not connected up necessarily the psychological to the physical, and it's definitely connected. So, and the sort of a simple way that I use to explain it is, think of trauma as it's constantly looping and running in the background. And so it's like, as far as your mind is concerned, I talk about the brain and the mind. So think of the brain as the computer, the mind is the software.
Okay.
So the physical brain, right, is obviously, we know what that looks like. It's physical, it's inside your skull. And the mind is the software that operates inside that computer. So
Hmm.
you can open up your computer, you can't see the software, but it's the programs that are running right inside the computer. So the physical brain, the computer, is subject to physical damage. So it can physically have something happen. You can get a concussion or whatever it is that can affect the operation of the computer. But when you think about the mind, those are the programs, and programs are subject to glitches and error messages. And so trauma creates glitches and error messages, which affect the computer, which then affects the entire system.
Hmm.
And if you don't get in and reset that, then it's not going to communicate properly with the rest of the system. So trauma continues to run and loop, and it'll show up as symptoms, anxiety, it'll show up as depression, post-traumatic stress, panic attacks. So when people come in and say, oh, I have anxiety, I say, well, that's just a symptom of something. Your mind doesn't get anxious for no reason. So you don't just wake up one day and your mind says, well, let's mess with Joe and create all kinds of anxiety for him, just mess his day up. It's anxious for a reason. So this is probably the most important part of the concept of what I talk about in our program tip. Think of an emotion, a feeling, or a sensation as a call for an action.
Hmm.
The purpose of an emotion like fear is to run and escape. The purpose of anger is to attack something that's threatening. So that makes perfect sense in a situation where you're threatened. But if you think about something that was threatening from 5 or 10 years ago, and you still feel that emotion, fear or anger, it's a glitch. How can you run or attack something that happened 5 or 10 years ago?
Mm.
You can't. So what happens is it's going to show up as a symptom. And so people are going to say, well, I'm anxious all the time. Well, that's probably coming in from a fear. What is your mind looking at and trying to get you to do? Chances are it's trying to get you to do something about something that doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And so how do we treat it? We medicate it. So really all we're doing is blocking the memory of the event from 5 or 10 years ago, but we're not fixing the problem. So the problem is when that happens, as long as, and think of it this way, sort of an easy way to describe it, your mind feels like it's constantly being chased by a lion. So you're in constant fight or flight mode. As long as you're in constant fight or flight because this trauma is unresolved, the body isn't going to get much maintenance done.
Right.
So all the great stuff you're doing is not going to fix the body because the body is in fight or flight. What's the primary motive for the brain and the mind? Survival.
Yeah.
And if you don't escape the lion, you're not going to survive anyway. So why would we want to waste the energy on maintenance?
Yeah, it's like so your body is probably literally shutting down these certain functions, right? Like that could be the maybe the detox pathways, for instance. I'm just kind of assuming.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's
Wow.
exactly what it does. Because what it says is, do we need to detox or do we need to run?
Hmm.
We need to run. Well, detox when we escape. And so now so the pathways, the methylation for all of that is shut down. Not only that, it shuts down. So inflammation increases with this trauma. And we're proving this. We just published a study that the inflammation, the genes that regulate inflammation are upregulated. We can see that with IL-6, CRP, things like that. The genes that regulate the immune system downregulate. The genes that regulate neuroplasticity downregulate along with neurotransmitters because it's an allocation of resources. We need all of our energy to fight or flight. And it even physically does that. So if you think about, if you get scared and nervous, you feel like you have to go to the bathroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it does that is because it's saying there's blood flow going to digest this to the stomach, right? To start the process of digestion. We don't need the blood flow there. We need the blood flow to the muscle groups, right? To the arms
Yeah.
and legs to run. So what it says is dump the fuel, get rid of, right?
Yeah.
Anything that we have to, because we don't want to process the food. We want to dump it. It's a drag on us when
Wow.
we're being scared. And so now we feel like we have to go to the bathroom because your system's saying flush.
Yeah.
And
It's
so the
survival.
sympathetic, yeah. So the sympathetic system is saying run, and you can activate the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest, which is your detoxation. All of those things are going to be considered not a priority until you escape the lion. But the trauma doesn't escape until you address it. And so that's what we do is then when we calm down the trauma, now the system can start doing its maintenance.
It makes perfect
Does-
sense when it's looping. How
Doesn't it?
could your body get out of that cycle? And like you said, it's usually looping on something that happened years ago that you have no control over the outcome. I mean, the outcome's happened, right? And for
Yeah.
whatever
It,
reason, we're locked in it.
so what it's trying to fix is something that doesn't exist. That's what I say. It's a glitch. But your subconscious, your survival brain operates in the present. So everything for your subconscious mind is now. It doesn't have any concept of time. It's only the conscious mind that can think of time. And so that 5% conscious, logical, reasonable, intellectual part of your brain is not in charge of survival.
Yeah.
It's the 95% subconscious that's running everything. 100 gallons of blood, every hour going through 60,000 miles of vascular, tubing beating so many times a minute. All of those things are being controlled subconsciously. And so that 5% conscious mind has absolutely zero say if there's a threat because it goes to
Wow.
the programming. And then the programming that's part of what you were born with, right? That system is running the show. And so it's going to be all focused on survival.
It's pretty wild if you think about it. It's like, yeah, we're our bodies and really the outcome of just how we feel is being run by a system that we aren't logically thinking about. It's just doing.
No,
It's just doing stuff. And how do you know when it's time to like I don't know, I'm just thinking of folks that maybe there's not an obvious trauma. There's not an obvious thing, but it's maybe we've coped with this feeling of like this low level anxiety for a while. Or we go into a situation and it's like, oh, that's just how I am. Like I guess how do you address people that it's not so obvious, but there's symptoms and things that are kind of showing up.
a lot of times the key and why I use the 4 hours in the program is I say we have to get the mind into optimal condition to start the healing process. Until the mind feels safe, it doesn't want to do maintenance. So that's why traditional therapy is not very good at trauma
Hmm.
because the mind is still not safe yet in that hour that you're with your therapist. So by the time I get to about 2 hours in, I've got the brain and the mind into an alpha, very relaxed, focused state. And then people will say, well, now I'm thinking about it, this happened to me when I was a child and this happened to me. So high functioning people have learned to manage that fairly well, but it doesn't mean it's not operating. And
Hmm.
so you could look at your computer and say, well, I'm running Excel, but you don't know that 4 other programs are running in the background.
Hmm.
And you think you're just working on Excel, but all those other programs are drawing power and energy, but you may not be aware of it. And so when I talk about obviously the big T traumas everybody knows about, those are obvious, but I call emotional concussions those little bumps that you got along the way. The
Right.
teacher that told you you were stupid, or like my wife has a great example when she was in elementary school, the teacher pulled her up to the front of the class and started firing multiplication questions at her. Now, was she deliberately trying to embarrass her? I doubt it. I don't think so, but you never know. But it didn't matter. So my wife Bridget, right, when she told me that story, was sobbing. This is before I developed the program. She says, I felt so stupid. I was so humiliated. And so then if you said, will you go up and stand up on stage and talk? Oh, not a chance.
Yeah.
Because what she learned, right, is that it's embarrassing. You're going to get called out. You're going to be ashamed. So she's high functioning. But at the same time, if you ever asked her to speak in front of anybody, she couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Was that a big T trauma? No, but it's an emotional concussion that was affecting the way she operates today. That's why so many people are afraid to speak in public
Yeah.
because they got embarrassed at some point, and the mind remembers that in high definition. And so somebody says, oh, why don't you just go up and speak? And the mind goes, what do we know about speaking in public? Pulls up that memory, and then they go into an active, right, sympathetic state. They're in fight or flight stage about something that happened 50 years ago.
But you don't feel safe, right? Like, or at least they wouldn't in that situation. And I think that's what the body is looking for, right? It's safety. So it's not that fight or flight. We can just be calm. Like you said, the alpha state, that's like ultimate, right?
That's the ultimate. That's the flow state. But
Mm.
the mind doesn't get into flow if it's got a lot of unresolved trauma running in the background because your mind's constantly searching its environment for signs that it's threatening. So say for example, you had a situation and somebody said to you, Joe, I need you to do this, right? And then you go, yeah, sure, I can do that. Consciously, logically, you go, yeah, I got all that. And then as you get ready to do it, your mind starts to say, okay, do we have any experience with these kinds of situations?
Mm.
Then it pulls up an event below your conscious awareness. You're not aware of it that was a threat. And then it'll start to shut you down. So when people say to me, I sabotage myself, I say it's actually impossible. That's one of the big myths. It's impossible to sabotage a brain that is focused on your survival. There's no
Mm.
way it's going to sabotage you. It's going to protect you. So for my wife, you said stand up on stage. Why would she be afraid to do it? Why would she could not do it? Because her mind was saying, "Oh, don't do that again. You're going to get hurt." So it would stop her from doing it. That's not sabotage. That's
Right.
protection.
And so give us an overview. And I know it takes longer than just a quick, 30-minute podcast episode or so, but what's an overview, at least understanding of your approach?
So yeah, this isn't therapy at all. This is basically we're going to reset the system. So when your computer freezes up, what do? Boot it down,
Reset. Yeah.
restart it, right? This is
Yeah.
what we're really doing. So I'm going to take two or three events in your lifetime that have been disturbing, similar like that, right? They could be big T traumas or they could be emotional concussions. And I take you through a process that will take them out of high definition into low definition. So if
Mm.
I asked you what you ate for dinner last night, Joe, what did you eat for dinner?
I'm trying to remember now. I think it was some lamb ribs smoked on a Traeger. It was great.
Perfect. So when I asked you that, right, you started to look and look to the side, trying to remember. I mean, you saw pictures, right, of what
That's
you
right.
ate, maybe where you ate it.
Yep.
That's how you stored the information about dinner last night. No animal does that, only humans. That's why you can feed your dog the same thing every day. They don't remember eating that yesterday.
Yep.
So that's a new meal when they get it today. But for you, you stored that information as what you ate. Now, it wasn't threatening. Sounds like it was good, right? But it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't a threat to you. So your mind stored it as a fairly low resolution file. So that's now stored in our explicit memory. Now, if you have a threatening event, all your senses are heightened, sight, smell, hearing. Now it's recording all of this in high definition.
Mm.
So now that explicit memory is stored in high definition along with what you ate for dinner last night. That stays on top because that was a threat to you. So now, if you had eaten those lamb chops and there was a fire, right, and you had to run, get out of the restaurant in order to survive, the next time you went to eat those lamb chops, right,
Mm.
your mind
Yeah.
would have went into fear mode.
It wouldn't associate too well with that dinner
W-
ahead. Yeah.
And would have connected up, and then every time you thought about eating it, your mind would go back to that memory, even though it may not stop you from eating it, but it would then you would feel a great example is I had a guy and he said to me, he goes, "Well, I don't know if this is a trauma." He goes, but he says, "A year ago, I went into Chipotle and he says, and I had dinner, and then I got so sick, I got food poisoning from the Chipotle." He says, "Now every time I drive by a Chipotle, right, I feel sick to my stomach."
Mm.
He says, "So let me understand if I've got this right." He says, "So what my mind is trying to do is stop me from going into the Chipotle?" And I said, "Yes, a year ago." That's what it's trying to stop because it
But it doesn't
sees
have
a
the time
year
frame. It
ago
doesn't
as
know.
now,
Yeah.
right? Because that's when you got sick. So it's trying to protect you from something that doesn't exist.
Hello, my name is Carrie Stewart, and I did the brain protocol for the MD Lifespan. I was struggling to recall names of couples, and so I shared this with the doctor. That's when he introduced me and said, "I think you're ready, and let me explain to you a TPE, because this is going to help your memory, your focus, your clarity, and I truly believe you'll be a wonderful candidate for this." I have had 5 TPE protocols, and each time I have improved. And it's not until this last one that I am feeling so back on top of my game. Like my brain fog is gone, I am focused more, I have more clarity. This was life-changing for me, and I feel so much better for it.
It makes a lot of sense even more with this whole thing of high definition and low def. So
Yeah.
how do you break from that? Like, is there a fast way that we can kind of I'm just thinking of something actionable here for our short time together. So I know this is a bigger process, but like breaking that kind of that frame, is there a way that you can kind of show us now?
Well, that's what it'd be hard to do it now, but that's
Okay.
sort of what I do. Is the idea is I got to get the mind into that alpha brainwave state.
Yeah.
And then, so for the first 2 hours, the 4 hours, we haven't even talked about trauma.
Ah, I
It's
see.
all about science and education. Then by the time we get to the trauma, I'll ask for, give me if we made that event into a movie, I'm looking for the trailer. So I'll
Mm,
have them relive the trailer. They don't have to describe it. If they want to, they can. I have different ways of doing it. They can do it just visually or they can do it talking, but I don't need them to talk. So what I'm going to do is take about a 2 minute highlight reel of that and reset it from
I
high
see.
def to low def because the mind will do the alteration when it feels safe, but it
Right.
won't want to make that change when it's feeling threatened.
And I guess would you bring the consciousness a little bit more to this whole subconscious thing that's been really steering the ship for a long time, right? It's, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And
And
then,
that's having the understanding of it. And that's why I spend so much time on the science and education, because when you understand it, here's what I hear all the time. This is making so much sense now. Now I get it,
yeah,
right? They just never understood. So they've been told there's something wrong. Oh, I have anxiety. I have this. I have that. And I go, well, no, that's just a symptom of something. Let's figure out why. Why would your mind get anxious? Why would you have post-traumatic stress?
right.
So I worked with the most dramatic one was a U.S. Army sniper who had to shoot and kill a 12-year-old.
Mm,
And so when he
gosh.
told me the story, well, he didn't even tell me the story. Somebody told me the story. And then when I met with him, he goes, I can't talk about this anymore. He says, I got arrested for throwing tables and chairs last week at the VA. And
Mm,
he said, and I said, well, I don't need you to talk about it. He goes, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to fix it. He goes, well, how are we going to fix it if I don't talk about it? Because this is what he's been used to, right? For
yeah.
years, 8 years in therapy. And I said, all I need you to do is come up with a highlight reel. You don't have to talk about it. I'll just do it all visually with you. I have no idea what you're going to say or what you're going to
Right.
be watching. By the time I was finished, I said, go back over it again, take a look at it, and tell me what you're noticing. And he said, with foul language, he goes, how the bleep did you do this? Why am I able to think about it now and I'm not shaking and crying? And I said, because
Wow.
for 8 years, your mind's been trying to get you not to pull the trigger. It saw you shooting the boy now because your subconscious operates in the now. So if your mind saw you shooting a 12-year-old, it was trying to stop you, but you're not shooting a 12-year-old, it doesn't exist. So for 8 years, your mind's been trying to get an action by using the emotion
Mm,
of fear and anger. It turned to anger because his mind
yeah.
was so mad that why did I do this? Why did I shoot that boy? I shouldn't have done this. This is what he kept looping over. And so it kept running in the background. So my wife, who had a traumatic childhood as well, would always say things like this to me. Don't you wish that never happened? Or don't you wish we never did that? Or we never met that person? And I had the opposite. I had an idyllic childhood. So I used to just go, why do you want to have this conversation? It didn't make any sense to me. What
Right.
I didn't understand is she was trying to go back over it and fix it, but she didn't know that that's what she was doing. It would just make her feel better. So if she could think of, oh, imagine how much better it would have been if this had have happened this way, but it didn't, and then it would loop back in.
Mm-hmm.
And her mind would
Gosh.
constantly be calling her into an action that she couldn't do. And that takes away from your enjoyment of life. So she lived with a very violent father, and so she was always living in fear. Now she's living with me. She's out of that household. It's still running.
Mm-hmm.
And so she'd be, if I said something as simple as, well, no, I don't really like that, she could tear up and start to cry. And she'd say to me, why are you mad at me? And
Mm,
Joe, I'd go, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not mad. Why are you thinking I'm mad? Her mind was going back over if I was tired and my vocal cords were just a little tighter,
mm-hmm.
she that sounded like I was yelling at her.
Yeah, slight tone shift there. And
Very slight. Well, you guys know all about this with how voice, right, makes a difference.
it's huge. Yeah,
Yep.
no, it's true. I mean, kids, you see it in kids, they're so receptive to, yeah, the different changes because you have a 5-year-old and yeah, I'm like, ooh. And I could see
They're
how
listening
like,
for it.
oh yeah, and it sure is imprinting, for later as well. So, I mean, I'm just thinking of so many people. I mean, everybody has some kind of underlying
Yep.
small t at minimum, just school, kids, just being them. Talk to me really quick on the physical side, because I'm thinking of how, and maybe it's a success story or someone that you've worked with where, they're coming in, and I'm thinking of, toxins, vitality, just like a physical change through clearing a trauma, using the process.
Well, the best one is why I got into this in the first place, is I got into
Please.
this to save my daughter.
Ooh.
So my daughter, when she was 13, was diagnosed with Crohn's.
Mm.
And they said there's no cure for Crohn's. We don't know what causes Crohn's. And so she lived with Crohn's for a while, and they cut out 24 inches of her intestines over 4 different operations
Oh,
and
God.
said, well, there's nothing you can do. Eventually, she's going to end up with a colostomy bag. And so what you would see is all of those toxins building up in her. They would constantly be doing things trying to help her. They had her on anxiety meds, depression meds. They had her on steroids. They had her on all kinds of things, but nothing was working. And so what I found is that as long as we didn't know about it. So we didn't find out. She ended up with a second autoimmune called idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis, which is where the iron builds up in the lungs, right? And it starts to empty out empty in the blood, empties out into the lungs.
Oh,
And so both of them, they said, no cure. We don't know what causes them. So that's what set me out off on the research trail to try to figure it out. And so I kept connecting trauma up to a lot of these autoimmune disorders. We didn't know she had trauma. We asked her, they said, I kept saying, the research is pointing me in this direction, but you're not somebody who has trauma unless there's something we don't know. And then she disclosed to us that when she was 6, she had trauma that she never
mm,
shared with us.
gotcha.
So now definitely that's what it was. So the unresolved trauma created inflammation. And inflammation compromises the immune system, neurotransmitters. So now what's going to happen? She was getting ear infections, throat infections, constantly sick. And they just kept putting her on antibiotics and all kinds of different things. None of that was working because her system couldn't get rid of anything because it was in constant fight or flight.
Wow.
So once I understood this, developed the program, took her through the program, she doesn't have Crohn's anymore. She doesn't have the lung disorder anymore. And the medical community go, well, that's impossible. Crohn's doesn't go away. It's either medicated or it's active. And neither are true. She's on any medication and it's not active. And that's been
Wow.
years. So that's what the system, as you know, our minds and bodies are designed to heal.
Yeah.
They're set up to heal. The whole system is all based on getting back to homeostasis. What's interfering with it is unresolved trauma.
Wow. And it's that layer, that subconscious layer that really is operating. I guess it's almost like above everything, even though it feels like it's that
Yep.
quiet little thing that doesn't really matter so much, but it matters. It's everything. It's running all the body functions.
Everything. So there's where the toxins are going to build up
Right.
because the system is saying, as soon as we escape, we'll work on maintenance. It actually affects even the mitochondria and the cells. So when I work with athletes, I say, we resolve the trauma, you're going to perform better. And we got all kinds of examples of people making personal bests and breaking records.
Tell me a
As
couple
soon
of
as,
this.
well, that's how I met our friend Joe Polish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was speaking at the 2019 Spartan World Championships,
Uh-huh.
and Joe was there. Somebody told me, oh, you got to go to meet Joe, listen to him speak. And so I did. And then he asked me, he goes, well, I heard you're working with somebody, at the World Championships. I said, yeah, his name's Rob Killian. And Rob's Special Forces Green Beret, he was running the World Championships on Sunday. And I worked with him on Friday. And there were 3 guys that were favored to win all the races. Rob beat them all. And I said to Rob, I said, I didn't make you faster. You were always that fast. That mitochondria is affected by trauma because it's pulling energy.
Hmm.
So think of it as you got this open program and your computer's running slower. Well, of course it's going to run slower. There's too much drain on it. And
Yep.
trauma creates a tremendous drain. Now you take that in world-class athletes like Rob, right? And you give them that small little percentage increase. That translates into 5th place to 1st place.
Especially with the mitochondria, it's the core, it's the root of all the energy, that we
All the
have.
energy, ATP, the millions of mitochondria in every cell, right?
Yeah.
You just compromise that. Another gentleman, Marco Cicchetto, he's a double amputee, lost both his legs to frostbite, a suicide attempt. But they started training him to run in marathons again because he was a marathon runner from Kenya. And so they built him blades to run on. He goes through our program. 9 days later, runs in a marathon, takes 15 seconds per mile off his time.
Per
And
mile.
then about a month later, runs in the Boston Marathon in 2019 and breaks the world record. And
Wow.
then 2 months later, runs in the Chicago Marathon, breaks his own world record by another 5 minutes, and gets signed by Nike. Now he's a Nike athlete. I
Jeez,
don't take
Louise.
credit for any of their success. They're phenomenal athletes. I just allow that energy to release. That puts them back to what their true potential is, and they can perform at their highest level. But that's
So
for
do you,
life as general as well, for overall health, all of
right.
those kinds of things, right? I believe 80% of the things that we're seeing and diseases and all of this are psychological based. It's having that much of an interference.
Do you believe that kind of resolving this trauma is the missing piece in personalized healthcare?
I believe that 100%. And that's what people haven't understood. So that's why, you have all these people who are saying, well, I eat right, I take care of myself, I do all these things, and I'm still struggling with weight, or I'm struggling with, well, the system's not doing its maintenance. You're trying to override it and hijack it or
Yeah.
biohack it. But what you really need to do is fix it and then start all of that stuff. Then the system will, start to detox itself naturally, which is what it's supposed to do.
I mean, I could just see integrating the two, integrating where you can release trauma and clear out the subconscious on the software
Yep.
level. And then you have something like TPE, therapeutic plasma exchange, other detox protocols to now you basically have cleared out or reset the software. So then
Yep.
now it's more the hardware. Yeah, and that cleans up on the toxin side of things.
Yeah. So the therapeutic plasma exchange will be more effective. It's not that it's not effective, but then it's going to loop back into, right? Like, oh, I'm going to have to redo it again because it's not, because the system is constantly saying pause, pause, pause until we escape.
Right.
So you can go in there and make a change, but it's like painting over rust.
Uh-huh.
When the rust bubbles back up, it's going to go back into its fight or flight mode. But we're
Wow.
we're seeing it all the time, and it's a world changing thing when you can show that the whole system. For example, a good example is they're using THC for a lot of veterans. They're saying, "Oh, this is what's chilling them out. We need to chill them out," and so anandamide, which is a natural endocannabinoid in our system,
Mhm.
right? What they said is, well, these veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress can't produce those endocannabinoids to calm down. And so I was talking to somebody one time about this, and they said THC sort of mimics what the endocannabinoids are doing. And so I said, do you know why they can't produce endocannabinoids? And they said, well, no, we just know that they can't, right? But they've got post-traumatic stress.
Mhm.
And I said, so here's the brilliance of the brain. Do you want your veteran, your warrior, right, in battle, chilling out?
Not at all.
No. Would the
At least
mind
not.
and the
Yeah.
brain think of chilling you out in the middle of a battle? It won't do it. So it won't produce that chill molecule that you need to calm down, because the mind thinks with these veterans with post-traumatic stress that the trauma is looping, keeps them away from wanting to chill out,
Mhm. Mm.
because you're not going to calm down when you're being hunted. The brain
No.
would never come up with that idea on its own. How could it?
Mm.
So that's what it's doing. So it's basically keeping you in fight or flight. Now you can't feel calm. So they put in THC, they biohack it to chill you out, but it doesn't last.
Right.
So you need to keep using it. But if they could just get the post-traumatic stress cleared out by getting the trauma cleared, Now the natural system will take over, but it's in pause, it's in freeze mode.
Yeah.
That's why the same thing with any other things that you're doing, even the plasma exchange, right, will work like the THC and then not work because it'll go back into fight or flight.
Yeah, your body's still stuck in that loop, that subconscious loop that's running 90+% of your body functions, essentially.
Yep.
Man, well, Dr. Wood, this is fascinating to say the least. Where can people go and explore more, reach out to you if they want to chat and learn more?
They go to our website, which is theinspiredperformanceinstitute.com, or I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. They can reach out any of those under Dr.
Right on.
Wood or Dr. Wood PhD.
Beautiful. And your success story, like I urge you guys to definitely check out, just or look at some of their stories, watch some of the videos, because like you're working with some top athletes, and like we talked about veterans and just quote unquote normal people as well.
Yep.
But I'm like, but it works all the same, and it's fascinating from everything I've seen. So thank
That's
you.
pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
of course. Well, I appreciate you, and we'll be chatting soon, I'm sure.
Sounds great.
right.
Thanks.
You got it.